I'm so excited. I've never done an interview with this large of panel before, but I have these lovely ladies from the Anabaptist community, and today we're going to be talking about clinging to God when your church community maybe doesn't stand with you. And I thought this was what a better group of ladies to hear this that fully understands this. I'll let them talk more about it, but just how as an Anabaptist, their community is very much part of their life and central. So I'm like, wow, they would really be able to offer a lot of comfort and wisdom. So no matter what your background is, I think they will have wonderful support and encouragement to give you today. So normally I go around the room and let everybody introduce themselves. We do have Angie here up in the corner who is on staff at Call to Peace Ministries, yay, and several of her friends. And so the way we're going to do it is we're going to jump right into the interview. And so if you know somebody here, why don't you say hello and greet them? Because it's somebody's here for the first time. It can mean a lot. So if you recognize a face, say hi. And then we'll start with the questions, and then they'll introduce themselves as they answer the questions. So I'm excited. Let's go ahead and get started. And if y'all just want to raise your hands, whoever wants to go first, whoever's feeling prepared for the question. So let's get going. And that is the first question is the church, as we talked about, is a very central part of life in the Anabaptist Mennonite community. As you think back, what role did your church play in this story during the time of abuse came to light? Gwen, did I see your hand go up?
So I can go ahead with that. Growing up and throughout my adult life, my personal church experience was a very positive experience, and I always loved church and spending time with my faith community. When the abuse was first exposed, the faith community actually heard me and believed me. But a few weeks later, after listening to the narrative of my husband, it became evident that support was no longer going to be available. Most of my local faith community went silent, and the ones that did communicate with me, it was done with a lot of condemnation and judgment. I'll have to say that the pain of that went far deeper than anything that John had ever done. I expected the pain from John, but when I turned to my faith community and felt the betrayal there, that actually went real deep. However, I was not left totally alone. Being led by my Heavenly Father, I was able to take the time that I needed to walk through the difficult bumps as I processed and worked through that part of my journey. And those who stayed close by walked and cried with me and gave me encouragement along the way. And I will be forever grateful to each one of those that was there with me.
Thank you, Angie, for sharing that. And Angie is the one that is on our staff. She is our advocate administrative assistant. I said that correct, right? Okay, good. Just making sure. And so thank you for sharing that. And then our next question is, were there moments where you saw God provide for you through your church, family, in ways that gave you strength and hope? And I really want to hit hard on this question too, because I want people listening to know how you can support those that are walking through abuse. So I'm hoping you will hear in these answers, this is how you can support somebody. And I see Gina's hand up, so I'm going to put you on the spotlight.
Hi, I'm Gina. I'm a survivor, and church played a huge role, very vital in my journey, and a lot of ways, more than I can keep track of, that they supported me. Prayers, financial support, there was texts, cards, helping do things around the house, babysitting, basically just being available when I needed somebody to talk to or anything. If I ever so much as breathed of a need and it was overheard, somebody would try to take care of it. So there were times where I turned down help for a few reasons, but one of them being, I didn't want to feel like I was taking advantage of them, but I was always told, no, you're not. We can tell when people are and you're not. So they were just stood by me the whole way, and even up to the time where I actually left and I filed for divorce, and they even supported me through that whole thing. It was very amazing.
Wow, I really appreciate you sharing that so open and honestly. Thank you. I could really sense the support that you found there in the way you answered that. So we just talked about, navigating abuse in church can bring both beautiful support and painful challenges. Can you share an example when the church helped you or when you felt God's presence through them? And I know Gina just kind of answered that, but if anybody has anything else they want to add in particular to that, raise your hand and I will pull you on spotlight. Oh, Gwen.
Yeah, I felt a great deal of support from the church once they understood what was happening. It was quite a journey until then, but I also had a son who got very interested in what was going on and uh, just learned everything that he could about abuse and its effects and what's in the heart of the perpetrator. And he was a great advocate with the church, but they listened, they cared. And like when my husband went into a treatment facility, the church took up an offering for us. Somebody in the church paid for a lot of mechanic work to be done on my car. And I actually felt very supported once they understood. It was quite a journey until then.
Wow. And I really appreciate what you just said, once they understood. And so I'm kind of leaving on the spotlight here is, how did they understand? What changed their mind?
I think that my son's knowledge through and most of his information came from binge watching Chris Moles. His knowledge and his intervention for me made a huge difference. I want to say this also because I think this is really significant in Anabaptist women getting support. Had it not been that there were issues with porn and sexual unfaithfulness, I'm not sure they ever would have really heard, because that's where they zeroed in. And though this sounds odd to say, that wasn't even what made that in a visible way, that was not what made most of the problems in our family. That was not what even gave me most of the pain. It was the relational things, the abuse. So, and I wish that could be better understood, because sometimes I wonder if I would have been heard had it not been for that piece. But there was that piece, and they did understand it was serious, and so they took me seriously with the rest of it.
Wow. And yes, it is sadly so true. So many times churches want to see something that's more concrete before they'll take it seriously. And that is so hard, because the emotional and the verbal abuse is what really hurts. It's actually what's really tearing apart the relationship unless it's being held accountable. And we love Chris Moles. So his material and stuff that he uses working with men and teaching abuse is wonderful. So I'm really glad you share that. He's a big partner with us. So thank you so much. Is there anything else you wanted to say?
I think that's all with that.
Okay.
I don't know what I did without the church's support. It was amazing. Yeah.
Wow. That's wonderful. I love hearing these stories of churches supporting. Is there anybody else that wanted to say something? Oh, Charlotte.
So I'm so thankful for both of the stories that we just heard. My story was a little different as far as support from the local church. I did have support from a couple of the women that were in the church when I first fled home. And I didn't introduce myself. I'm Charlotte, and I'm in the advocacy training program. When I first fled home and I needed a place for the girls and I, a safe place for the girls and I to go, one of the ladies in the church, she opened up her heart and her home to us. And she had a basement that had everything that we would need in it. And so we were able to stay with her for a couple of, well, not quite a couple of months, but, and she never once told me that I needed to go back to my husband. And she provided a safe place for the girls and I to be. And then I had another sister in the community that she was one that actually stayed. And when I say stayed, I mean she's been with a friend now for years, 5 years now. And what I remember probably most is that I needed to go back home and get some things from the house, because when we left, I didn't live with very much. And she went with me, like she did the scary thing, and she went I felt like into the trenches with me, like she was there, and her presence was so calming for me. And it just brought so much comfort, having her there with me and knowing that I didn't have to do it alone. And that's kind of what happened my local, but outside of that, once I left our local church, I needed to do some moving. There was a church that I was visiting, and I told them my story. I had only visited a couple of times, and I needed help moving, and they provided a moving team to come and help me get some things out of the house. And they didn't even know me, but they believed me, and they trusted my story, and they stepped in and helped. And then, of course, I had the other Big C church. I had sisters from other churches that I had been of that were very instrumental in helping. But with my local, I didn't feel the support that I wish was there. Initially, I did feel supported a little by the ladies, and then I think as my husband's narrative got spoken, I could feel a shift, and I felt like their words were no longer their words. I could hear his narrative, excuse me, in the words that they spoke to me. And so I wish that there were things like protect the flock, and I wish that they had maybe the training to provide the care to support the girls and I well. I am thankful for the support that I did have with the sisters that did reach out and help.
Wow, thank you for sharing that. And I think that just highlights too, even if your church doesn't get it, it doesn't mean that you in your church cannot make a difference too. And so I just think that's really important to point out. And what you said is that, yes, that one friend, your church may not got it, but a friend stood there by you. And so I just think that's important to know that you can be that difference. You can be the Big C church, the community of Christ, and really love on women being impacted by abuse. So thank you for sharing that. And on the other hand, were there times when church relationship became more difficult, when the church community struggled to know how to respond? How did you cling to God during that season?
Well, I feel like I've already spoken, but I just want to briefly say, in all honesty, that I was excommunicated prior to what I already said. And that was one of the most painful things that ever happened in my life. So, yeah, we did walk through that.
Wow. I would love to hear about that. I would love people to talk more than once. And I know you because of the retreats. I would love to hear more about how you clung to God through that, because being excommunicated from a church, I think a lot of women hearing this can relate, because it's not the only one. But I would love to hear about, if you're willing to share, how did you cling to God through that?
Well, I avoided him for a while. I was really terrified to get alone with God because I was afraid he was going to tell me the same thing the church leaders were telling me. And I didn't really understand abuse. I didn't really understand what was going on. I just knew that I was powerless over what was happening. And as another sister, not part of our church at all, when I shared with her, she says, "What does God say?" And I said, I can't make myself be quiet in front of him because I'm afraid he's going to agree with him and I don't know what to do. And she encouraged me to trust him, that he really was for me and that I could trust whatever he would say to me. And that was so comforting me, because when I went before him and said, "God, how do you see it? Am I guilty of these things that they say that I am?" I felt nothing but comfort and peace and reassurance that he had seen it all and that he was there for me. And so I could go forward then, because I knew that my God didn't see me that way. Yeah, he was truly the God of all my days. By Casting Crowns became my banner, because I often couldn't feel him during those years, but I certainly had felt him earlier. So I clung to what I knew of his presence during the earlier times.
Wow, I can so relate to that. Like during times like where in those moments, and it's normal from abuse when you go through trauma. Rebecca Davis teaches us that your body naturally feels separated from God. It's how you feel separated from everybody. It's a normal response to trauma. And I did definitely pull from where God spoke to me earlier in my life and his presence. But what would you say to the woman today who's sitting here and just like, God, I'm so scared to come to you and hear what you have to say. I'm so scared that you're going to also be like my abuser and say, gosh, you don't submit enough. Just try harder. You're bad, or whatever it is. What would you say to her?
I think just trust him. Be still. God can be trusted. He's a good father. And just to take time to really say, God, what do you see when you look at me? Here's your daughter. What's in your heart, Father? And he's amazingly faithful to just assure us of his love. And but that's the thing. Really, really go and take time to listen to what he says. Don't just assume that he's saying what they're saying.
Wow, that was so incredibly beautiful. I'm like, oh my gosh, it makes me want to cry. It's just so beautiful hearing your heart and sharing that, because it's so true. And it's so scary to walk vulnerably to God and be willing to hear him when you feel like those that you view next to God, the leaders in your church sometimes, condemn you, and you're scared he is too. So thank you for sharing that. I hope that gives comfort to women. Is there anybody else that wanted to share something?
Yes, I would like to say a little something. I am Judy. I am an affiliated advocate with Call to Peace Ministries for at least 2 years. I don't know exactly how long. I am not a survivor of domestic abuse in marriage, but I am a child survivor. And to your question of how do you cling to God during that season, when your community doesn't understand, reject you. My husband and I also were excommunicated from our church after we advocated for a survivor. And I'm with Gwen. Like that is probably one of the most painful experiences I've ever had. And I'll just share this as some of the things that helped me during that season. I've walked with God long enough that I know that there's no condemnation to those of us who are in Christ Jesus. And so I knew I wasn't afraid to come to God, but my heart was just so broken. And so one of the things I did was I created a lament playlist on my music app, and I played lament music pretty much constantly when I was home alone, especially. And that kept my heart soft before the Lord and helped return my heart to peace, to bring the pain, the sorrow in music to him. And another piece that was really helpful for me was just to go to the Gospels. And I know scripture can be hard when it's been weaponized against you, but going to the Gospels and looking at how Jesus interacted, especially with women who were not, cared for and well thought of in that society in that day, the way he interacted with women, especially those that others condemned, was a huge comfort to me, because Jesus says that he is the image of the Father. We look to him, we see God, right? And so watching and reading the ways that Jesus interacted with women who had been tossed out by their communities, who were rejected by their communities, reassured me of God's heart for me and for women who continue to suffer in our communities.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. Wow. I'm just like, I'm loving hearing y'all's heart for the Lord and just how he's met you in these things. I think that's one of the most beautiful things to me about coming out of abuse, is hearing how God shows up and really does see those who are oppressed and those who are accused wrongfully. And he stands with them, like the woman caught in adultery, and just like, where's thine accusers? And so I don't know, gets my heart very, very excited. So thank you for sharing that. Is there anybody else that wanted to share something that did not get to say something in this? Okay, well, we will go to our next question, and that is kind of laying off the back of what we just talked about, but just going a little bit further. And that is, what has the journey taught you about relying on God when human community doesn't always reflect his heart perfectly? Angie.
Okay, so with that, even when, people have walked away, when they don't understood, my Heavenly Father was always faithful, and he never forsakes his children. He was there in the journey, even when it was lonely, confusing, and dark. His light was always there, shining the way. so that I would know which step to take as I walked along that path. Recognizing that and staying in that when all around feels so dark and overwhelming. Just clinging to him and knowing that that light is there, knowing that he is goodness and that he does have our best interest in mind, does bring a light. But there's a lot of grief on this path. And that grief shows up in ways that sometimes we aren't even aware of. And then all of a sudden it's, we're once again on our knees, begging God for direction. And he's always so faithful. And I never once felt condemned or rejected or thrown out. He just stayed right beside me every step of the way.
Thank you, Angie. Does anybody else want to share something? Oh, Gwen.
If I share again. So there was a very pivotal moment when I felt like God really, really showed up for me. I went into kind of a depression. I mean, it wasn't a clinical depression, but things were dark after I separated from my husband. And I kept seeing a shipwreck and I was floundering in the waves. And I cried over everything. I could hardly function. I was afraid I was losing it. And one morning, and I had a playlist, like Judy said, a playlist of just comforting songs and do not fear and God is there and all this. And I had a lot of ship songs in there as far as that had imagery of shipwreck and being in the waves. And one morning I just suddenly saw, it was in my mind. It wasn't like, I don't know how visions work, but I saw myself on the deck of a new ship and God was there. And he not only, I cannot tell you what an epiphany that was for me. It was like I was no longer in the waves. He said, no, you're not in the waves. You're not in the shipwreck. I've got you on a brand new ship. And there were deck chairs. There had never been deck chairs on the other ship. I hadn't even thought about it until I saw them on the new ship. And we could fellowship and he would take the wheel sometimes, and other times he would say, here, you do it. I trust you. I won't let you get too far off. And it's been the most amazing journey on this voyage with God. But that morning was really pivotal. I never went back to that darkness again.
Wow. Thank you for sharing this. I love that. I love when God gives us visions. And I do believe that he speaks to us through visions and dreams. And the scripture is very clear on that. That's beautiful. And sometimes when I feel like we have no words or don't really know how to express ourselves to God, sometimes God shows up in a vision of where he is in this situation. And that was really beautiful. So thank you for bringing that to this conversation. Does anybody else have anything they want to share? All right, we're going to jump into discovering a healthy community. What has been the most important in finding or rebuilding a healthy, safe church community? Anybody? Maybe.
Okay, I can speak into that. So in finding and rebuilding a healthy, safe church community, I had to kind of take a step back and look at this in a bigger picture. And in my deepest longings, it would be that there would be a place of understanding that power and authority that Christ speaks of is to serve and to build up, not to be used as a weapon to coerce and control. He created us with a choice, and he has never forced us to do anything. In Luke 22, Jesus is speaking to his disciples, and when they asked who is greater, he says, the kings of the Gentiles exercise lordship over them, and those in authority over them are called benefactors, but not so with you. Let the greatest among you become the youngest, and the leader as the one who serves. For who is the greater, one who reclines at the table or one who serves? Is it not the one who reclines at the table? But I am among you as the one who serves. That is my deepest longing. That is a community that I would love to be a part of someday.
Yes. And my next question for you is, and I'm looking forward, and if you've already spoken, please speak again. Like I love hearing from everybody. So if this is something that you have, if God's putting something on your heart, share it. So for someone listening who feels alone or misunderstood in her church, what encouragement from your journey would you share with her? Gina, yay.
Well, while my church supported me, there were still, of course, times where it gets hard. It's discouraging, lonely, but I would just like to say, don't ever give up. God is always there for you, even when it doesn't feel like it. The Psalms were a big help for me. I found myself kind of like living in those relatable scriptures in those hard years. And yeah, it's just, God is just there over and over. His faithfulness, his love, and his grace, even when I didn't deserve it. And he always came through for me. And I just like to say, when you think you can't take it anymore, just take a deep breath, put your hand on your heart, feel it beating, and know you are loved and needed, and that God does have a purpose for you.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that. Does anybody else have anything they want to add?
It was important to me to realize that God sees me just as tenderly as he sees the young women that I look at and care about. And sometimes I look back at the young me and wish that I could go back and give her better advice and could walk with her. And God has assured me that he doesn't see me today any differently than he saw me at 18. And just so I don't know what this has to do with the church community, but it's just this thing of really cultivating an understanding of how God sees us. And that's and don't be afraid to consider trying another church, because there are churches who have a different attitude about things. And I visited around the churches in my area until I got to one that I wanted to go back to. And I would say the key thing in that church was that I felt seen as a person, as a sister in the Lord. I did not even realize that all my life, the churches, and I'm still Anabaptist at heart. I really, really am. I still believe the tenets of the teaching, and I appreciate the community, but there is no Anabaptist church near, and I'm going to a little community church. And something I saw there that I had never even known was a thing is that I was just a sister in Christ. I didn't have to watch the way I interacted with people, lest my warmth would be mistaken for flirtation, or that my confidence would be mistaken as being out of my place. They didn't even have to say anything. I felt the difference. And I just hope that as you journey from church to church, you find a church where women are not a threat. I don't think the brothers in my Anabaptist church would have meant for it to be that way. And since then, I actually know a lot of Anabaptist brothers who value me just right at their side like that. But up until that time, I had not experienced that.
Wow. Thank you, Gwen. You have so much wisdom. I appreciate you sharing that. That's really good. And sometimes it's okay to branch outside. I've definitely done that before too. I was like, wow, I'm gonna try a different denomination and grow. I really appreciate you saying that and showing up where you feel loved and seen. That's really important, and not giving up on church. I think that's something that's hard for a lot of survivors, and maybe I'm approaching a subject I really shouldn't. But it's okay to keep looking and to keep searching until you find a church where you feel safe. And sometimes it's okay just to show up and hear the sermon and be like, well, the sermon feeds my soul, but I'm not safe yet interacting with this full community. That's okay too. It's searching and finding out what works for you. And that's okay. It's just finding where God has you at. And sometimes you may be at one church for 2 years and another church, and so it's okay. And I just want to say that. So does anybody else have anything else they want to say? Oh, Hannah, I saw your hand go up.
Yes. My name's Hannah. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, because I was having some issues with service, but my name's Hannah Yoder. I'm in Sarasota, Florida, and I am a people helper. I've been with an advocate with Call to Peace for about 4 years, give or take. And I was going to say I had some input on some earlier questions as well, but to your last question, I was going to say the one thing I hope people aren't afraid to just be when it comes to with God, just he's not afraid of our anger. He's not afraid of our confusion. He's not afraid of our pain. None of it is too much for him. Like I am not a victim of domestic violence myself, but we have experienced a lot of other trauma along with horrific spiritual abuse where my husband was silenced. And, we call that period, or I call that period of the time, the dark night of the soul. It was a very difficult time, where you just sat there in darkness and despair and wondered, is there a God out there? And if there is, where is he? And but God shows up in unexpected places from people you wouldn't expect it from. And so sorry, I didn't really expect to get this emotional, but just for the people who are still where that grief and that trauma is raw, like, don't think that it has to be look this way. Like, I have to be reading my Bible, I have to be praying, I have to be doing this and this, a formula for me to have a relationship with God. Absolutely not. That's what Jesus came to free us from, was that set of rules and the oppression that man has put on God's children, and so this season in time may look totally different. For myself, I still don't attend a church regularly because we haven't we were either just too triggered and too raw to attend for a long time. It's been a period of about 4 years. We're just starting to dip our toes back in a little bit. But to answer a previous question, some of the things I'm looking for in a healthy community is empathy, compassion, and empowerment of all people, no matter the gender, the race, and seeing how someone responds when someone's in pain goes a long ways. It's like the quote, the indifference to suffering. I can't think of the exact quote, but basically it's along the line that the indifference to suffering basically makes the human become inhumane. Like, if you continually turn your head away, refusing to look at someone's in the eyes at the pain they're going through, you're going to become indifferent and not, end up in a good place to where you lose that empathy and that compassion. So those are very high on my list, but also along with that, justice, to where if there is harm being done, that there is justice that is carried out as well. So I hope that makes sense.
That is excellent. I really appreciate you sharing that, Hannah, and sharing so vulnerably. Is there anything else, because you got to jump in a little bit late, and you're connected now, that you wanted to share that you feel like you didn't get to say?
There probably is, but I'm not able to remember the questions clearly. But I mean, I really liked what Gwen was saying as well, like going into a culture where women are celebrated and empowered and not looked at as a threat. That is huge, because there are no gender should have more power than the other, and so like that's definitely something that I also look for in a healthy community.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And I appreciate you just sharing so vulnerably. I think that probably really touches a lot of people's lives when you're willing to show up authentically and share where you're at. So thank you so much for sharing that. And it's okay too to
Absolutely.
season where you feel like sometimes you just can't open your Bible. It's too painful and it's too hard. Just God doesn't condemn and judge us. And do what you can to connect with him in that moment. And he's going to meet you where you are, and it's okay. So thank you for sharing
Right.
this vulnerably. Is there anybody else that wants to share something based on that question too? Oh, Charlotte.
Yes. So I first want to acknowledge that there are no words to accurately and fully describe when you're abandoned by your church community, or abandoned by people that you thought would always be there. And so I just want to acknowledge that to the one out there that are sitting in a place of devastation. There are no words. One of the things that I've learned is that abuse is a gospel issue. And if it's a gospel issue, then there's good news. And for us, the good news is that God cares for the oppressed and he hates oppression. And I feel like he wants us to, during this time, to get to know him better and get to know who he is. Because once we know who he is and we see his faithfulness and his character, and we can focus on that, for me, it just gave me strength to keep moving forward in the really dark times. For me, it was also important to know that that God prioritizes our health and safety, and our children's health and safety over any institution, the institution of the church and the institution of marriage. And I feel like during these times, God, his heart is to show us who he is, to know that he is right with us every step of the way. And so I would say to the women that are feeling discouraged right now, to just know that God is with you during this season. Like he is for you. I know we know that he is with us because we hear that all the time, but we don't always hear that he is for us. But he is for you during the darkest season, and he is with you when the night is endlessly long. And please try to remember that even during the times when he seems quiet and maybe you don't see his light shining the way on the path, that he is working in the shadows and he is so very near.
Thank you. Does anybody else have anything to add? All right, and that leads us to our final question. And I'm excited for this question too. And please feel free to answer it authentically. What gives you hope today about how God can use the church, even with its flaws, to bring healing, support, and redemption for survivors? So I'd love to hear your thoughts. I know we've shared both the highs and the lows, but let's end with, what is your hope for the future?
One of the things that gives me hope.
Okay.
Sorry. This is Judy.
Okay, thank you. I'm like, wait, which one?
One of the things that gives me hope is seeing the Called to Pieces continuous announcements of churches that are asking for the Protect the Flock trainings. There are leaders and people who want to care well for this issue. And I'm so thankful. And I continuously pray that God raises up more people who care, more people who are interested. That gives me hope.
Yes, thank you for sharing that. It gives me hope as well, is that well, Angie, you have hope. I know we were talking because I'm reading your story, so I want to hear what you have to say.
Okay, so I was along the same lines as Judy. 7 years ago when I left, there was very few resources available. You had to really dig to find. And so I want to make sure I say I don't fault those who didn't understand and who were unsure of how to deal with this situation in my community and who, needed to go silent. And I don't hold that against them because there really wasn't a lot of resources. Today, Called to Peace has Protect the Flock training that they're able to go to different churches to train. They also have the church partnership that they will come alongside the pastors and church leadership when domestic abuse is revealed or exposed happening within their churches. Clarity in Action has their church training called Light in the Darkness that is helpful to come alongside as well. And I'm just seeing different ones popping up. And to me, that is so hopeful because, like I said at the beginning, my heart for the church, it's there and I love it. I have always loved the church. I'm Anabaptist at heart and probably always will be. It doesn't set me apart from anybody else. My heart is the same as yours. But that's just the culture that I walk in. And so to see them stepping into those arenas and learning, I have a son who is digging into these issues and understanding and speaking into these issues as well. And that has been so heartwarming after knowing all of the things, that he has had to experience, and also I have. And so just the hope that churches are willing to hear and have teachable spirits and the humility to ask for help.
Oh, Gwen, you have something to share. Yes.
Yes, so I'm kind of along the line of what Angie said, her son. And my children give me hope. And this is something I would love to say to all women who are navigating this dark and confusing path, that we're pioneers to show the next generation a different way to do it. And in our misunderstandings, we're also educating our church leaders, and it shouldn't have to be us. There's a little nap there, sorry. But if it does have to be you, just know that you're making it easier for those behind. And so the younger generation is understanding this and caring about this. And a lot of the reason it is the organizations like Called to Peace. And I bless the Lord for everything Called to Peace is doing. It's also the mothers, the women who have stood up against it and told their stories and been willing to take the heat to protect their families, to bring things into the light where this generational stuff can stop. My heart aches when I think of the generations of women who many of them just went to their graves with carrying this quiet grief. And we have so much available to us today, and our young people are our hope of the future for the church.
Wow. Yes. So true. As we can be generational cycle breakers when it comes to domestic violence and domestic abuse. And so that gives hope, is women that are walking through this and teaching their children something different and watching a new generation come into the church that has different views of things. Does anybody else have anything else they want to say before we close out? I want to make sure I did not leave anybody out. Anything you want to say?
Yes, I guess I would say my hope with the church, because, honestly, there are times looking in, it does look pretty hopeless, but I would say my hope comes from seeing the ones who are, like Gwen said, standing up, pushing back, saying this is not okay, who don't stick their head in the sand, who are speaking up for the oppressed, the young, the ones who don't have a voice or maybe are not at a place to be able to say something at the time, is that's the true church. It may not be an organization, it might not be in a building, but the people who are doing that are the church. And I feel that there's a lot of us that may feel isolated around the world right now, but that, that's the power of social media as well. It's that we have each other, we can continue to speak up, we can push back and say, this is not of God's kingdom. This is not why Jesus came to the earth. And that gives me hope, because so many times, the quote church or the organization is using coercive control to keep people silent. And so to see the ones of fighting back against that, I'm like, that shows me that you are a believer and you understand what Jesus said and how he lived his life. So that gives me hope.
Thank you for adding that in. That was really important to share. And I've also dropped a link in the comments to connect with our church partnership program. If you're a pastor watching this today, or you're a member of a church and you have some leadership in your church and would like to invite us to host to protect the flock, so that you can learn how to care well for those who are oppressed in your congregation, we invite you to reach out. And several of the women here are advocates or connect with them. So you're always welcome to reach out to Call to Peace Ministries and request an advocate if you think you're in abuse, and or become an advocate for a woman in your church. We have so many opportunities for you, so you can be part of making a difference for future generations as well. So thank you so much, ladies, for being here today. Thank you for sharing your wisdom, your heart. It's blessed my heart, and I hope it has for so many others too as well that is watching. So boy, I hope all y'all have a wonderful day.